Welcome back into the Thomas Fitch Sports Show. As usual, I am your host, Thomas Fitch. Another episode of Texas football recap, looking back at Texas's 28-21 victory over Tulsa at home. We'll break that down, talk about that, look a little bit ahead to the USC game coming up this Saturday, the rematch, and we're going to go around the college football landscape, see exactly what happened. That and more coming up next. All right, so starting off Texas football recap, talking about the Tulsa game. Another week, another disappointing Horns team. You know, it's a 7-point win at home, and I've kind of struggled to break this down and decide exactly how I feel. And I remember right after the game ended, obviously last week I was still pretty optimistic even after losing to Maryland, but I remember I was texting with my dad, and I was like, optimism's gone. That, at the end of the game, walking out of the game, felt like we had just lost. And obviously, anytime when you schedule a team like Tulsa, the point of scheduling a game against a not good team is to get a feel for your team before you play, before obviously Texas, USC, and then conference play. But instead of being able to say, okay, we're going to let Ellinger, we'll let the starters play the first half, get a big lead, maybe let them play a little bit in the third quarter just to kind of, cement that lead. And then the rest of the game, you can let your freshmen get some time. You can let Bouchel, some backups, you can let them have a chance to play. And so that obviously did not happen. And, not only does it just look bad as a team to only win by 7 points against a Tulsa team that struggled last week to beat Central Arkansas, only won by 11. And again, Central Arkansas, an FCS team. But it just hurts you as far as giving everybody experience, giving everybody game time experience. But it was a win. And, at the end of the day, the stats weren't that bad. You look at total yards. Texas had 478 total yards, 1 turnover, average 5 yards per carry. That's not bad. But to score 28 on a not good Tulsa team with those stats is poor. And granted, I know there were, for the most part, there weren't many 3-and-outs. And that is one thing that I will say that's impressive. But there was a lot of kind of driving to midfield, getting stopped there. There was the turnover on downs on the Tulsa 2. And so just a lot of maybe could have been better. But, looking on the other side, obviously there's, you have the turnover on downs. You have pass interference that should have been called in the end zone. A lot of things that could have happened that could have made this a much bigger win. But on the defensive side, they missed 4 field goals, even though one got called back for a penalty. So 3 field goals they missed. And then 2 balls they had that were dropped in the end zone. So again, both teams playing with a lot of mistakes. And again, it's 2 games of the season. I'm not saying you have to play mistake-free. The point of, again, scheduling a team like Tulsa is to kind of get out those mistakes. But getting out those mistakes shouldn't mean that you are literally, holding your breath in the fourth quarter against a team. Maybe holding your breath. I mean, there are a lot of teams, as I'm going to talk about a little bit when we get into college, just looking around at college football. But there are a lot of teams that will struggle. Wisconsin struggled in the first half. West Virginia struggled in the first half. TCU struggled in the first half against teams. And the thing is, it's okay to struggle a little early on with a not so good team. The key is you can grit down in the second half and say we're going to put them away, and say that's that. Not having to stress about Tulsa, not being able to put Maryland away in the second half. That's not the stuff that elite teams do, and that's what worries me about this team. Now, granted, again, a win is a win. Sitting at 1-1. USC game's next. Somehow Texas is favored. I'll try to talk a little bit about that at the end. I don't know how in the world we're favored, but a lot of football left to be played. And I said that last week. I'm going to say that this week. This coming Saturday will be the first week where I can actually feel like I can get a good read on this team, and I can say, okay, yeah, this team definitely can't compete. But, a team that is, shooting itself in the foot. Again, there were still a lot of penalties that made the game a lot closer. A lot of holding calls. They were playing with a banged up offensive line, and so I get that there were things there, and that's why I'm saying that the USC game, the TCU game, these next couple games are huge. Looking forward to the rest of the season. But I do. Let's start talking about offense. I'll break down that. Talk maybe more about the rest of the season in a little bit. But offense was definitely a tale of two halves, really offense and defense. Going into halftime 21-0 at Tulsa, thinking, okay, it could have been a lot better. You have the turnover on downs. You have some questionable penalties or no calls. That would have helped. And so you look at that and you say, okay, that's not bad. Come out in the second half, keep that momentum going. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. There was a lot of stagnation in the second half. The third quarter was really rough. It really was just the third quarter. When you look at the game, there were only 4 drives in the fourth quarter. And it was because I think the first drive, our first offensive drive, was about 6 minutes. The second one was like 5 minutes. So that's a good chunk of the fourth quarter. And that's nothing wrong with that. And so that's one of those things that gives me more hope, is being able to sustain long drives when you need it. And that was something that, even against Maryland, they had long drives. They were just turnovers. But again, another thing, no turnovers at the end of the game. And I remember it was about 5 minutes left when Texas got the ball back, and they ended up just running out the clock to end the game. But I remember turning to my friends and saying, it's Ehlinger interception time. And I hate that I say that, because I really like Ehlinger, and I think he's our best option at quarterback. But, looking back at the past, that is the time when he makes those mistakes. But he didn't. And so, again, that's another positive. But I really thought the play calling was poor. It really, honestly, what surprised me the most was seeing that we still ran for 5 yards per carry. And I think some of that, obviously, Keontae Ingram had the 26-yard touchdown run, Daniel Young the big 30-yard run. So there's a couple big runs kind of helping that not be as small. But there were a lot of runs just right up the middle, getting 2-3 yards. And you can't win football games like that. And you can win, you can beat Tulsa like that, but it's going to be close. But when you're playing USC, when you're playing Oklahoma, and you're playing good defenses, you're not going to be able to just start running the ball up the middle and hoping that one of these days you're just going to get a huge hole and run through it. And I also get that they were struggling just running the ball in general, because obviously Patrick Hudson in the hospital, Shackelford out with, I believe, a foot injury. And so, granted, you're down 2 linemen. I do want to give a shout-out to Samuel Cosme, who was Offensive Lineman of the Week, I believe, in it was the Pro Football whatever rankings. Really good. But I just felt like overall it was just way too many runs up the middle. And Trey Watson, all these running backs, except for Daniel Young, but Trey Watson, Keontae Ingram are much better when you get them on the outside. And the plays when there was maybe a screen to the outside, the run went to the outside, it was a lot better of a gain than when they were just running up the middle and running into defenders. And one thing that I get every team's different, so you can't run the same plays. But one thing that I really liked last game that I didn't see this game was the little option pitch, where Ehlinger runs, can either cut in or pitch, and that worked very well against Maryland. Didn't see that at all. I will say this about Ehlinger. I feel like I'm kind of just bouncing around. But it's kind of confusing, because there are a lot of positives, a lot of negatives in the game, like I've said. But Ehlinger's still running the ball really well. He's, I want to say it's Colt-like, because he's not fast, but he's just really elusive, and he's not afraid to just lower his shoulder and run you over. But his little sidestep, stutter step moves, really good. It just kind of surprised me, because, I'm not saying he's slow at all, but, he's not a Gerard Hurd. He's not a Vince Young, RG3 running in the backfield where he can just, make little moves and just beat you on the outside with his speed. He runs at you, makes a little move, and somehow, the defenders bite on it a lot. So that was good. But, yeah, overall, would like to see the running game go more outside and less on the inside. As far as the passing game went, obviously, like I said, it was a really efficient game for Sam Ehlinger. I believe, I'm looking up his stats right now, but I believe I'm correct that it was about it was something like 21 of 27 for 237 yards, 2 touchdowns, only 1 fumble. And at the end of the day, you can't ask that much more of a quarterback who we know is not the greatest quarterback in the world. I don't think he's not going to win a Heisman. Maybe in the future, possibly with some development. The point is, he's not the best quarterback in college football. But to put up very efficient stats, 21 of 30, or not 21 of 27, 200, almost 250 yards, 2 touchdowns and interceptions. That's all you can ask of him. However, one thing I would have liked to seen more of is deeper shots. It was a lot of little quick slants, little quick screens, and some of the screens really frustrate me when there's no blockers out there, and it's like I've never gotten why it seems like Texas offensive coordinators love to call okay, let's throw it to the wide receiver who has 3 defenders on him, behind in the backfield. I do like the running back screens because, like I said, it gets them on the outside where they have the speed and can use their speed. But yeah, I would like to see more deeper shot. When you have Devin Duvernay, you have Gerard Hurd with a lot of speed. You have Colin Johnson, who's literally 6'6". Why are we not throwing it to him more? I mean, he's one of Tom McShay, one of the draft guys. One of their top prospects, like a top 10 prospect, and we're throwing to him 3 times in the game. There's no way that should be happening. It should be every time you have the ball and you're dropping back to pass, your first look should be to Colin Johnson, and I promise you he can have a guy on him and he's still open because he goes like that and the defender's right there. It's an easy catch. And so I would like to see more of them. The throws that really worked to him well, and I think Texas did it twice in the game, and they were both completions. Little, running down the sideline, little out route, catch him on the sideline. I don't get why there's not more of that. And it really feels like last season where the coaching staff just doesn't have a lot of trust in him. And so because of that, they're not having him throw deep. And kind of the 2 deep balls, he threw one to Duvernay, or maybe 2 to Duvernay, but there was one that he threw to Duvernay in the end zone. Just great cover. I mean, it hit Duvernay in the hand. Not saying Duvernay, Ehlinger overthrew it a little bit. But it was good coverage and an almost perfect throw. And so I'm not going to fault him there. Then there was another time where he throws it deep, underthrew a little bit, and whoever it was, I think it was Duvernay again, the defender basically tackles Duvernay because he's trying to come back to the ball, and no flag was thrown for pass interference, which was a blatant pass interference call. And then after that, they didn't take any more deep shots. And that to me is you almost had Duvernay there. Then another time you should have gotten a pass interference. You have you have so much talent. Why waste it throwing Colin Johnson little bubble screens? It makes no sense, and of all players to throw a bubble screen to, why Colin Johnson when you have Lil Jordan on the field? And so a lot of just kind of confusion to me on why the play call was happening. Didn't love the goal line. The one time we were on the goal line, well, the first time we were on the goal line, obviously the little Ehlinger run worked. But it was the second time when there was the turnover on downs, and it was running up the middle twice. Really, the only thing that really frustrated me, there was one time where Sam took it on an option and running back ran in the end zone without the ball, which was frustrating. But it was the 4th down call where it was that little rollout, the little sweep play that Tim Beck loves to call, or I don't even know who was calling this game, but the little rollout that has never worked in the history of Sam Ehlinger playing with Texas, and tried to call that, and of course it wasn't going to work because it never works. And so that was frustrating. I would have liked to have either what really worked in the spring game, and I remember talking about this back in the spring, what really worked was running the little Jordan Wildcat play, where he just takes the direct snap. I mean, it's basically it's the 18-wheeler, but with little Jordan instead, the 84-wheeler, I guess we could call it. I don't know why we weren't doing that. I know Herman said he didn't put in Daniel Young on whatever when they got down there, because I think it was a little Jordan caught it it wasn't that, it was K Brewer. They were kind of driving down, stepped out the 2, and so Herman didn't want to sub because they were going quick. I get that, and I completely get that, and that's one thing that I think a lot of people, and I've really never thought about that till this year, is when people say, why didn't, for example, the Seahawks, why did they throw the ball when they were on the goal line in the Super Bowl? It's because they didn't have the personnel, they didn't have the fullback there to block, and so if they had ran it, he would have gotten blown up, most likely, because they didn't have. So that's one thing that I've never really thought about until this year, and I think it's an interesting thing to think about, especially on the goal line, is when you're trying to go hurry up going down the field, you don't always have your goal line package there, and you don't necessarily want to sub, because if you sub, then they can sub. But what did frustrate me was that Texas did sub on 4th down. So if you're subbing on fourth down, bring in Daniel Young and run it up the middle, or run with Lil Jordan. So didn't love that, but at the end of the day, it was 3 good quarters of football. It was just the third quarter where the team couldn't get anything done. And, it was 28-21, really could have been 35-21, but obviously Texas just trying to run out the clock when they had the ball at the end. Really what impressed me, and I'm just kind of, thinking back on the game, was the 6-minute drive and the 5-minute drive in the fourth quarter. And last week I remember talking about how the defense got stops done when they needed it to. This week when the defense wasn't getting stops when they needed to, the offense was going on the long drives they needed to. And so it's nice to see either sides of the ball kind of stepping up and getting what they needed to do done. Let's move to the defensive side, which I don't know if I would say defense was more disappointing than offense. Both kind of struggled and both looked good and struggled at the same time in the game. Again, like offense, got off to a good start, held Tulsa to 0 points in the first half. You look at first half stats, 155 yards, 2 turnovers, 0 points. Very efficient. That's what you ask out of a defense. And granted, there were some missed field goals, and so it wasn't like they weren't moving the ball at all. But regardless, this is and I think one thing to look at with Tulsa, this is a very good offensive team, and that's why the offensive struggles worry me just a little bit, is because this Tulsa team is very good offensively. They, I think, ran for 220, 240 yards last week when they played Central Arkansas. Granted, FCS team, but still the point is they have a competent offense. So them having some offensive success doesn't surprise me. And honestly, giving up 21 points at the end of the day is not the worst thing. If you put up 52 points, 52-21 is a great score. But if you're only going to score 28 points, you would have loved to have, held them to a touchdown or two. In the first half, I thought the secondary lockdown, I have it all caps, lockdown coverage. Really, everybody was playing lights out. Josh Thompson, Chris Boyd, Caden Stearns, B.J. Foster looking incredible. B.J. Foster stepping up and starting in place of Brandon Jones, who's injured. Both B.J. Foster and Stearns, the freshman, had really good interceptions. So future's bright, I would say, at that position. Chris Boyd, heck of a game. After slightly disappointing game against Maryland, there was just a couple of times where they threw the ball deep and just perfect coverage by Chris Boyd to stay there, get the head turned around, get in the right position, knock the ball down. So he played great. Really good to see him stepping up. But what was disappointing this whole game and really this whole season is the struggle to get to the quarterback. Really manifested itself in the second half. But, here's this stat really defines this defense well. Last year, this team, which was the second best defense in the Big 12, averaged almost 2.5 sacks per game. This year, there's been 1 sack through 2 games, and not against good O-lines. And so, and the 1 sack was by Chris Boyd. It's not even by the D lineman. And so I get Orlando's definitely been very hesitant to blitz. It's been mostly either 3-men up front, or sometimes you're bringing in, a linebacker off the edge. But regardless, not a lot of pressure in either games being brought to the quarterback at all. And so he's definitely had very simple schemes. The question is, and so obviously Maryland and Tulsa have more mobile quarterbacks. The question is, is he putting in these schemes just because it's mobile quarterbacks, and so we're going to see more conservative schemes against mobile quarterbacks and more aggressive schemes against non-mobile quarterbacks, or is it just that he doesn't feel confident blitzing a lot with this team? I'm not sure what it is, but regardless, there's got to be more pressure. And Orlando's known, this is going into the season, everybody's saying, yeah, Orlando's known for all these creative blitzes. What is he going to do this year after doing such a good job last year? And I'll tell you what, this dude probably wants to stay in Austin at this point because he is making sure he's not getting hired at any head coaching job next year because he was one of the hottest names for the head coach position coming into this year. But, looking back to last year, the almost 2.5 sacks per game, the sack leader on the team was Malik Jefferson. And I get that you've lost him to the NFL. However, you lost him to the NFL, but here's the deal. You still have your number 2 and number 3 sack leaders from last year in Charles Omenihu and Brecken Hager. And they're playing just about every down. And I get that you're still rushing in the 3-man front, but you're not playing against like the freaking Alabama offensive line. You're playing against the Tulsa offensive line. You should still be able to get some pressure in there at some point and get a sack. Like, I'm not saying that they have to go off for 6 sacks against Tulsa. I'm just saying put some pressure on the quarterback, because here's what happened. There wasn't pressure applied enough to the quarterback, and so in the second half, the secondary can only do so much when there's not any pressure on the quarterback. And when the quarterback has 5 seconds to stand in the pocket, the receivers can start moving all around, and it's so hard to guard them as even when you're playing good coverage. And Tulsa had 2 of their touchdowns were cornerbacks getting burned. One of them was Joshua Thompson, who really just kind of got flipped around, and I kind of jinxed him because I was talking all game. He was playing good. He's playing lockdown defense, not making any mistakes, and then blows coverage and allows for like a 50-yard touchdown. And then I think it was over like Kobe Boyce or something like that. Some young guy, a big touchdown later on. But that all happens because there's not pressure being brought to the quarterback. So I would love to see Orlando get more aggressive in the USC game, because and I think you're going up. Talk a little bit about the USC game, but USC starting quarterback JT Daniels is a freshman. He has struggled. He's thrown for his accuracy is 55% through 2 games. He has 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. That, to me, I'm saying, if I'm Orlando, I'm saying this is a young guy. He's playing on the road. He has struggled with just hasn't been very efficient. I am blitzing him as much as I can. I don't know how good USC's offensive line is, but you start getting pressure on a freshman. We saw what happened last year. You pressure Ellinger, and he throws, has a tendency to throw interceptions. And Daniels is much less mobile than Ellinger. So I would certainly hope that Orlando would put more pressure on, or would bring in more blitz packages. If not, that would definitely disappoint me. And I get there's also a lot of different personnel. It's a really weird scheme because you got the 3 linemen up, 3 linemen up front. Then you have like middle linebackers. Then you have like an edge, and you have in the secondary you have your cornerbacks, your safeties. You have a nickel, and so it's kind of weirder formations, but there's got to be more blitzes. And there's got to, and even if you're not blitzing, you just have to put more pressure on the quarterback, and you have to force sacks, because otherwise the secondary is going to get burned at the end of the day. So that's about it for the defense. Needs to see some improvement. Not worried about the secondary, even though they gave up some big plays. More worried about the front 7 and how they can improve. Because this game, the front 7 was healthy. It was the secondary that had injuries with Devontae Davis and Brandon Jones being out. The front 7 was healthy. There's no excuses like there was in the Maryland game, having Anthony Wheeler out for some time, having Gary Johnson out for some time because of targeting penalties. No excuse to not get pressure there. So would like to see more blitz packages, would like to see more sacks. That has to happen if Texas wants to have a chance at beating USC. We're now going to bring back a segment I forgot to do last week. But we, you got to throw in some segments other than just talking about Texas offense, Texas defense. So this is the superlatives. Superlatives. We're going to start with offensive MVP. Kind of tough because Trey Watson, Keontae Ingram both look good, but at the end of the day, you have to give it to Ellinger. Played a very consistent game. Kept the team in the game the whole time. Didn't make had the one fumble at the beginning of the third half, but. The third quarter. But he was rolling out. There wasn't much. Not very disappointed about that turnover. That happens. But no big turnovers at the end of the game. Very efficient game by him. Defensive MVP, again, could go to a lot of people, but at the end of the day, going to have to give it to Chris Boyd. I was talking about him earlier. Just lock down coverage all day, really, or all night, whatever. But just, I don't think there were many receptions over him. There was a lot of deep balls where he was just put himself in the perfect position to turn his head around and knock the ball away. So that was really impressive. Special teams MVP, got to give it to Bachevsky. Sorry, Dicker the kicker. As much as and I'm really hoping that Dicker starts kicking a bunch of field goals because I would love to be on the Dicker the Kicker Heisman train because there are shirts. I've seen Dicker the Kicker shirts. I would love to be wearing a Dicker the Kicker shirt and being like, hey, Dicker the Kicker for Heisman. But he kicked 4 extra points. Still has yet to kick a field goal in a game. But Chevsky, I know he struggled a little bit. He had the 24-yard punt, but he had 2 guys in his face. That's not on him. That's on the blocking team for punting. That needs to improve. But he had a punt that landed at the 5. He had a 52-yard punt. And, I'm not going to start Bachevsky for Heisman yet because he's a freshman. I think he will get there. And I think when you compare him to Dickson, I think he's on a much better path. I'm not saying he's necessarily going to be better than Dickson. We're going to talk about Michael Dickson in a second. But I think he's definitely he looks better at this stage than Michael Dickson did as a freshman. And so I think there's a lot of he has a good future, a lot of good things in store for him. And special teams player of the game is Ryan Bachevsky. And then as far as play of the game, also could go a lot of ways, but you got to give it to the PJ Locke hit. If you haven't seen the PJ Locke hit yet, I don't know. It's probably on like Longhorn. I think Longhorn Network tweeted it. But like literally, okay, here's the defender. For those of you listening on the podcast, I'm going to try to make this good radio. For those of you watching, this is easy. Here's the defender. My hand is straight up and down. PJ Locke is my other hand, my right hand. My right hand is at a perpendicular angle to the player and parallel to the ground because PJ Locke literally went parallel. If you watch the video, it is his head and his feet are at the same level, about 4 feet off the ground, and he just flies like, bam, I'm trying to make good radio, bam, like that. Just, helmet, not even helmet, shoulder right into like the ball, forced the fumble, completely clean hit too, and he just flew like a missile right in. One of the best, cleanest, incredible hits I think I've ever seen. We probably spent about 5 minutes freaking out about it, even though Tulsa ended up recovering the fumble. Just a great play. Really cool. Look it up if you haven't seen. I may even try to see if I can get a video of it in this. And so really briefly before we go to talking college football and talking a little bit about the USC game too, I want to talk. We have a little special teams segment, and we've already kind of talked about Texas special teams. So that means we're going to focus on the GOAT, Michael Dickson. I tell you what, 1 game into the NFL, and he's already the best punter in the league, maybe ever. Listen to these stats. 6 punts, 354 yards. Yeah, that's 59 yards per punt. That's the average. That is insane. The league leader last year was like a 48 yards per punt. He also had, of those 59 yards per punt, of those 6 punts, he had a 69-yarder. He had a 59-yarder that landed at the 2-yard line. He is just, at this point, it's 1 game, I know. But, I don't think much changes in between games for punters. He's going to be the best punter ever. He's going to go down as the best punter ever in the NFL. He's going to win the NFL MVP this year. He's going to win the NFL Rookie of the Year this year. He's also going to win NFL Special Teams Player of the Year. He's going for the big 3. So, we're no longer Michael Dickson. We're no longer Michael Dickson for Heisman podcast. We're Michael Dickson for NFL MVP, NFL Rookie of the Year, and NFL Special Teams Player of the Year. And by the end of the year, they may be like, hey, just come join the Hall of Fame already because he is killing it. And this is a first, but for those of you watching on YouTube, here are his highlights from Sunday, courtesy of Onside Kick TV and Fox.
And Michael Dickson, the Seahawks moved up to draft him, Australian rules player in his background, and they wanted to get Dickson as their kicker, and Adam Pac-Man, Michael Dickson with his second punt of the game. Pac-Man Jones is back deep. And it'll bounce at the 10, and the Seahawks are there to down it inside the 5-yard line. And they're going to mark it at the 2. Nico Thorpe was the man down there, and the marker went down by the official at the 2-yard line.
Sure, you can't get that done.
4th down, and Dickson will kick it away, and Adam Jones is back deep. Jones returning it from the 28-yard line, and a good special teams play.
Field to defend that pass to Bennett.
Michael Dickson Good kick. Pac-Man Jones can only watch it, and it went out of bounds. Pac-Man Jones says it's about the 7. Let's see what the official says. Well, you're almost right. Maybe the 6.
He just hit a rocket right there. What a weapon that is.
5th round pick from Texas.
Miller on the edge. 3rd sack of the game.
And Pac-Man Jones angling over as this punt goes out of bounds. Terrific punt by Michael Dickson, who earlier had a 69-yard.
Harris Jr. can turn a tight corner, and he gets another sack.
Dickson kicking from the 10-yard line, and Pac-Man Jones will see it take a Seattle roll inside the 20. So Dickson, now you know why they traded up to get him.
So for those of you who are listening to the podcast, obviously you can't watch that, but you have 2 options. Either go to Onside Kick TV, it's on YouTube, you can watch his highlights, or just go and watch my YouTube video and watch those highlights, because he just absolutely killed it. So a little kind of looking forward to the USC game. I would say Texas. Okay, so Texas somehow a 3-point favorite, and while I say somehow, USC's, they've kind of been struggling. They beat who did they play? UNLV. Kind of struggled early on, and again the kind of first half struggle. Went on to win like 49-14 or something. Then they lose last week to Stanford 17-3. Clearly they struggle a lot on offense, and so I can see they're coming on the road. They have a young quarterback. I can see why Texas could be favored. Still don't think we should be, but I understand it to an extent. But here's what I think. I think we are in store for an ugly game. Will it be close? Absolutely. Will we see overtime? Probably. Texas will probably lose in overtime again. But here's the deal. Both teams struggling on offense. I think we're going to see a kind of slugfest, and not even like a good like SEC, Big Ten, like rough it, tough it defense. Really ugly offense. Occasionally like a broken play because of some missed tackles. So I don't think it's going to be a pretty game, but it will be close. So very excited to see that. Shame we couldn't get College Game Day, but at the end of the day, when both teams are 1-1, neither really deserve it. But that is going to be, I think that's going to be a really good close game. But again, not anything other than that. All right, so let's move on to talking football. So not a lot of big upsets or even really close calls, save for the Clemson game, which we will get to. And I think for this section, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of break it down, go conference by conference, and just kind of do. And the way I'll go conference by conference, I'm not going alphabetical. I'm going kind of like power ranking conferences. So we're going to start off with the SEC. Yeah, they're still the best conference. Also, other than A&M, they didn't play anybody. A couple of them played, whatever. But SEC is still the best conference. I don't see anything from any other conferences that make me think top to bottom most depth. So I will say I may have been wrong. A little preemptive to say that the SEC East was going to be more competitive. I said South Carolina could be good. I said Florida could be good. Well, Georgia destroys South Carolina on the road 41-17. Kentucky upsets Florida on the road. Granted, that doesn't mean that those teams won't compete at all, but especially South Carolina, that was like, okay, I was like, South Carolina, if they're in a close game, they don't have to beat Georgia, but if they're in a close game with Georgia, there's a chance that they could have a shot at winning the SEC East, but they get destroyed by Georgia at home. Kentucky, I get Kentucky has a much better team and much improved team. I think they'll make a bowl game, probably a 7-8 win team, but they're not competing for the SEC East. And so for Florida to lose at home, I would say that just about takes them. And granted, it's Dan Mullen's first year. And so, again, kind of rebuilding, first year kind of deal. I still think Dan Mullen was a great hire. I think in the long run he's going to be a good coach there if they will be patient and give him time. But, I would say just about give SEC East to Georgia. And obviously, actually one thing. The one team I do see standing in their way, Drew Lock and Missouri, the team that Texas destroyed. We destroyed Missouri in the bowl game last year. But I think Drew Lock and Missouri could be that could be a team that could sneak up and have a sneaky good season and maybe contend for the SEC East. As far as the SEC West, no reason to say that any other team is going to challenge Alabama at this point. Mississippi State had an impressive road win at Kansas State, so they could be a competitive team. You look at A&M. As much as I hate to say it, but they look really good against Clemson at home. We'll talk about the ACC in a little bit and how they are going to be an underachieving conference. But this A&M team could be dangerous. I don't think that they're going to win or come close to winning the SEC West, but I think they will pull off one or two big upsets. And I think they will both be games at home. I'm not sure who they have at home, but I do think that would not be surprised if they pull off some big upsets. And yeah, other than that, Auburn didn't play anybody big. LSU, Alabama, they're all playing nobodies. So, looking forward to, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, but a lot of good matchups this coming weekend that I think are going to help give us a much better feel for the college football landscape. The second best conference I would say right now is the Big Ten. Very top heavy. Very top heavy. Basically, it's Wisconsin, Ohio State, Penn State that are, I would say, the three best teams. Wisconsin struggled a little bit. Again, the classic, struggling at halftime to a non-power 5 foe and then, exploding in the second half. And Wisconsin did that against New Mexico State. Ohio State, that was the team that last week I said I was a little worried about because they gave up some 44 points to Oregon State. But Oregon State actually looks really good. They had some running back who broke some school record for yards in a game last week. So I would say Ohio State, and then they dominated. I don't remember who they played. They played Rutgers, and they held them to 3 points. And so they did that. Penn State played Pitt, destroyed them. And so both of those teams were teams that were, had close, Penn State much closer game than Ohio State, but still kind of results in week one against, non-power 5 teams that definitely, Oregon State's a power 5 team, but are they really? But, results over teams that they should have beaten more. And so I was a little worried about them, but kind of cleared that up with big wins over power 5 teams. So it really feels that Big Ten's a 3-team race. I know Michigan and Michigan State have good losses. Michigan State losing on the road to Arizona State. Michigan losing, I believe, on the road also to Notre Dame. But they just don't seem – I don't think either of the teams have the talent to win the conference. I think, it's definitely going to be between Wisconsin, Ohio State, and Penn State. That's going to be fun. Ohio State and Wisconsin don't play each other. Wisconsin and Penn State do towards the end of the season. That could be a really, really good game. But I think no matter what, Wisconsin cruises to the – I don't even know if they're doing legends and leaders or East and West, whatever side they're on. Ohio State and Penn State definitely going to be in a fight. I still think Michigan could upset Ohio State. I think they're good enough to beat any team on a week-to-week basis, but not good enough to win the Big Ten. Looking at the Big 12, again, a couple halftime scares for West Virginia against Youngstown State, TCU against SMU, both not very good teams, but both escape with big wins against these nobodies. Looking at OU, solid win against UCLA. However, they lost star running back Rodney Anderson. He's out for the season. So, obviously, not much. I don't have many more takes about West Virginia or TCU. I do want to look at how Rodney Anderson's injury is going to affect Oklahoma going forward to the rest of the season. And here's, I could be completely wrong, but here's how I think this will affect them. It's definitely going to limit them offensively. And what made their offense so dangerous was you have the triple threat. Kyler Murray can throw it. Kyler Murray can run it. Rodney Anderson can run it. And it was the same thing that you look back at, a lot of teams with mobile quarterbacks. Obviously, my mind goes to Washington Redskins' RG3's rookie season as well as Alfred Morris's rookie season. When you had the triple threat, RG3 could throw, RG3 could run, Alfred Morris could run. And that made them so deadly because you don't know exactly what to expect any play. And so losing the threat of Anderson running it, I think it definitely hurts them. That's not to say that they can't contend for a Big 12 championship. However, I do think, in my head, I think it takes them out of the national championship conversation just because there are a lot of good teams this year. And to beat an Alabama, to beat a Georgia, you got to be at full strength. And to lose Rodney Anderson, and now your star, when you had Kyler Murray and Rodney Anderson, it was a nice tandem where it wasn't just, a young quarterback leading the team. Now you have a young, pretty inexperienced quarterback who's the sole leader of this team. But I still think that they're still a really dangerous team. They're still a fairly experienced team because they returned a lot of starters from last year. So I still think that they can absolutely contend for a Big 12 championship, but I do think that this takes them off of just about any chance of winning the national championship. So fourth best conference in my mind, I'm saying Pac-12 over ACC here. I just think there's a little bit more depth to the Pac-12. So you had the early conference matchup between Stanford and USC, kind of illustrates Trojans' youth as they lose 17-3. And when you kind of look at breaking down, nobody else really played anybody big. But when you kind of breaking down the North and South divisions, Stanford and Washington is going to be a really, really, really fun battle for the North title. And then, in the South, it's kind of up for grabs. You have Utah, you have Colorado, you have USC, but the team I really like to maybe contend for the Pac-12 South title and have a chance to get to the Pac-12 title game is Arizona State. Throw up the forks. But, a big win against Michigan State. Granted, it was at home, but, I don't know what Herm Edwards is doing. I don't know if he knows exactly what he's doing. It's pretty weird, the whole running it like a corporation. But whatever he is doing, it's working. Good win against UTSA, good win against Michigan State. This is a team that, and I think because the Pac-12 South is a little lackluster this year, a team that could definitely contend to win that. Definitely not saying that I think that they're a playoff team, but I think they're a team that could find themselves in the Pac-12 championship game by the end of the year. And then moving down, final conference of the Power 5, ACC. Can we just go ahead and pencil Clemson and Virginia Tech into the ACC championship game already? Florida State almost lost to Samford. I don't know what's the Willie Taggart experiment is not going good so far. I'm sure Willie Taggart's saying, why didn't I stay at Oregon? And I promise you, Jimbo Fisher's saying, I am glad I got out of that conference. Still can't beat Clemson, but I am glad I got out of that conference. I would say one team to keep an eye out for is Boston College. They're in the same division as Clemson. The only really team that I could see kind of doing some damage. Kind of a down year for the conference. Miami maybe. Kind of tough to tell because they lost to LSU, but how good is LSU? But I think Boston College is a sneaky good team who could upset Clemson or Virginia Tech, knock them out of conference title, a chance at the conference title championship or whatever, conference championship. And I do think ACC is so weak that a conference loss could keep Clemson or Virginia Tech from making the college football playoff because the SEC is strong, because the Big Ten has some good teams, because Big 12 has possibly some good teams. Not exactly sure how good OU, West Virginia are, but Stanford, Washington, a lot of good teams right now. And Clemson's strength of schedule is so poor at this point. Obviously, the win over A&M could help if A&M goes on and has a good season, but Clemson loses to Boston College or someone else, and that could completely take them out of, in my opinion, the playoff conversation. So that's definitely something to watch for. But the reason that I say that it could take them out of the conversation is because they have such an easy schedule. So I'm not saying that that it will happen, but I think it could, and I think that would be interesting to see no ACC teams make it in. Got to talk about Notre Dame. A little independent talk, and I put them as one of my sleepers last week, and they reward me with an 8-point win over Ball State on Saturday. So I'm taking them off my sleeper picks, and I'm placing them on upset watch. They're playing they host Vanderbilt on Saturday. Let's little anchor down here. Go Doors. I'm not very biased on this podcast. I've said we like 12 times about Texas. I've referenced my NFL team, the Redskins, and I'm saying anchor down. I'm going forks up. Who cares? But anyways, yeah, I think they could be on upset watch. Vanderbilt, decent wins over I remember like Middle Tennessee State and then Nevada. So could be definitely could be an upset. 8-point win against Ball State does not look good. Definitely makes Michigan look a lot worse after they got destroyed by Notre Dame. So right now, going into week 3, my college football playoff 4, number 1, Bama. There's no reason to take them off the number 1 spot. They look really good. Georgia moves up to number 2. A huge road win against South Carolina boosts them up there at this point. I was a little, not sure about them after last season, or after last week, just thinking, okay, they looked good last year, but the only reason they're in the top 4 is because they looked good last year. They played nobody. But big road win against South Carolina moves them up to number 2. I'm moving Ohio State, jumping them over Wisconsin, and I'm putting them at number 3. And the reason I put them at number 3 again, like I said earlier, I was a little worried about that Oregon State giving up like 44-some points to Oregon State, but it looks like Oregon State actually has a really good offense, and again, they're still playing without Urban Meyer. If Urban Meyer comes back week 4, who knows what's going to happen. And then in the 4th spot, you got to put Clemson in there right now, without a doubt. Tempted to put Wisconsin in there, but at this point, Clemson, they had a big win on the road against A&M, which is not – College Station at night is not an easy place to play. And so being able to win that, survive that, and the fact that they really don't have any other tough competition other than playing Virginia Tech, who, again, we don't really know how good they are. So that's why I put Clemson in the 4th spot. However, here's the deal, and I mentioned this earlier. This weekend, I think we're going to get a much better feel for how good teams are because a lot of these teams are actually playing real opponents. So let's see. Let's look who. There's LSU Auburn. That's going to give us a good feel because I still, LSU destroys Clemson, but how good is LSU? Also, Auburn beats Washington. How good is Auburn? So that's a big game. Wisconsin plays BYU. I know BYU isn't ranked, but that's still a tough power. Or they're not power if they're independent or whatever. But still, it's a tough opponent. Some would count them as a Power 5 level team. I'd rate them higher than playing, Rutgers or Oregon State or Kansas. So I think that'll give a good feel for Wisconsin. Ohio State, TCU, that's absolutely going to, see, can this Ohio State team, A, win without Urban Meyer, B, are they legit, C, is TCU legit? And then finally, Washington, Utah, little conference battle, seeing, I really think Washington's a good team. I think they lost to a really good Auburn team basically on the road. I think they still have a good chance of making the college football playoff. But their first test since the Auburn game is playing Utah. So there's my top 4. Going to be a great weekend of college football. I'll tell you what, a lot of good games. But yeah, that's it. Texas plays USC Saturday, 7 o'clock on Fox. If you're a student, make sure you're there, but give me a better spot. But no, for real, would love to see that stadium just absolutely packed and rocking on Saturday night. I think that's all I got. So from the Thomas Fitch Sports Show, I'm Thomas Fitch. Hook 'em horns.